Hello everybody, and welcome to the second video dealing with technology and business. In this video I want to chat about the pros and cons of moving to the cloud and whether people should or shouldn't move to the cloud. If you want a quick short answer and not have to listen to the whole video, then the answer is basically yes, people should move to the cloud. But it's much more nuanced than that if you look at all of the issues around moving to the cloud. So without further ado, let's get on to discuss that. Now I think first of all, to find out what is the cloud and what are its benefits, or why is it so compelling? Well, I'm sure you all heard people say that the cloud makes IT into utility. You want more, you just order more, or you just turn on the tap, turn it off. You want to use more electricity, you turn on more lights. If you want to use less, you turn them off. And that has a lot of advantages in terms of being able to quickly bring online new resources that you need to run your business, especially today with COVID-19. Now more and more things are going to move online. I mean, they were heading that way anyway, but it's a much more rapid pace now. People are going to have to move all of their services online. So one of the ways they try and describe the benefits of cloud is that it turns a capital expense into an operational expense. So instead of having to save up and then buy 300,000 rands worth or $1 million rands worth of computer equipment, wait 3 months for it to arrive, then deploy it and commission that equipment, now you can just go online, punch in your credit card, and instantly have resources. Obviously, there's a number of benefits to this. One, it becomes a operational expense and not a capital expense, which means there's tax implications. Secondly, it also means that you don't have this long delay where you have to go to the purchasing department, wait 6 months for it to arrive, get it delivered, then it comes up from stores, then IT has to deploy it, and eventually 6 months later you get your resources. So it makes you much more flexible and able to respond quicker to changes in the market. Now, although that is the sort of main benefit which they describe about cloud and its cost savings, there's also ancillary benefits. So, for example, you need a lot less system administrators to administer cloud resources than you do if you've got your own IT department. In essence, you no longer need a database administrator if you're using the database as a service. You can just click a button and your database is deployed and it's optimized, and you can even scale it or cluster it at a click of a button. Other benefits include the fact that you automatically have backups. It's very easy to maintain backups and to restore them. I don't know how many times in the past I've ever gone to the backup operator and you needed to restore something. It was always that particular file or that particular day's backup that you had a 50-50 chance that it wasn't backed up for some reason. Oh, you forgot to tell us to back up this folder. Or, that day the backup didn't go through, but it went through for every other day. So these kind of things, non-financial risks, non-financial costs or direct financial costs, also would make the cloud a compelling solution for your database needs, for example. Actually, and database as a service is just one of the services that they offer. There's plenty of other services. There's big data as a service. There's AI, there's machine learning that you can use just as a service. And that's another thing, it lowers the learning curve or the amount of skills that people need to be able to start taking advantages of these new types of services like machine learning, image recognition. You can simply upload the images that you want, train the machine learning algorithm on the images you want it to recognize, and Bob's your uncle. There you have a machine learning algorithm and you've learned to classify pictures. And this can save a lot of money and a lot of time, and allows your company to now really rapidly, even if you're a small company, take advantage of the changes in technology. Another benefit of the cloud, which isn't made explicit, but is you no longer need a disaster recovery plan, because that's essentially taken care of for you by the cloud provider. If you go, Amazon will say that they've got in their availability zones, that they've got multiple data centers in your data, depending on how you architect your solution in the cloud, can be replicated across different data centers within availability zone, even across different regions. Obviously there's costs involved. Now, sometimes when you start looking at the costs, at the bill you get at the end of the month from your service provider, your cloud provider, you think, well, am I really saving money? Because they can be quite high. This is one of the risks, obviously, is that if you leave something on by mistake, or you have an inexperienced cloud architect and it pushes a few buttons, and next minute you've deployed the largest instance of Bigtable on Google Cloud, for example. It can be quite expensive. But if you take these ancillary costs into account, the reduction in headcount, the time to market, the time to respond to changes in an environment, no need for disaster recovery plan. Now the auditors come and ask you, what is your business continuity plan, business disaster recovery plan? You can just point them to AWS or Google Cloud service that you're using, and so that's already provided for you. And those companies will provide you with a audit certificate verifying that they're actually implementing, doing what they're saying. So I think those are the benefits of the cloud. Just to kind of use an example, we had a client, the database starts running out of disk space, it takes them 2 days to give you more disk space. Whereas if you're on the cloud, you just click a button and you have more disk space immediately. So with all of those benefits, what are the cons? Well, the cons are in many cases non-financial. One is that you're de-skilling your organization, so you're having skills leave your organization, which if you have to bring it back in-house again, it'll be difficult to build up from scratch. Also, they try and say there's no vendor lock-in, but once you're in the cloud, it'll be hard to get out, especially if you've got large amounts of data, because data can accumulate there over time, and then trying to transfer terabytes or petabytes of data out of the cloud, be either back on premise or premise, will be very costly. So one of the strategies people should consider definitely is a multi-cloud strategy, or a hybrid plus multi-cloud. So a hybrid means you have some of your resources in-house, and you have some on the cloud. And multi-cloud means you have some resources in AWS, for example, some in Google Cloud, and some in Azure. So one of the bigger risks, which I think is often not mentioned, is what's happening in the world today with the weaponization of services. So we've seen already things like how if you're reliant on a particular country's technology, it can just get cut off from you for various reasons, right? Whether they're political or not, who knows? But the fact is that's a risk that you must consider. The world is quite dynamic. Maybe in the next minute an export ban gets imposed on your country, and you can no longer use those services which are vital for your infrastructure of your organization. Now I know this might sound far-fetched, but I've been alive long enough now to see many changes in the world which I wouldn't have thought possible when I was much younger. So I think it's something that you have to kind of consider, how quickly you can get in and out of the cloud, and how much at risk you are of some unforeseen event happening that will actually cut off access to those resources. If it's, for example, an undersea cable, as simple as that might get cut, and then you can't work properly for 2 or 3 days. What impact does that have on your business? Of course, there are moves to get the different service providers, cloud service providers, to set up data centers in South Africa, in which case it will address some of the legal issues around where you can actually maintain your data. Can your data be stored in the US or the UK, where their legal jurisdiction applies? We've seen in the past, for example, and it happens time and time again, that the United States Security Forces will demand access to data that's on servers hosted by cloud providers in those countries. Even, for example, if Microsoft has a data center in Ireland, the US government will claim jurisdiction over it because it's an American company. So these are very real issues that you have to consider in terms of your risk, where you're going to place your data. Of course, now we're living through the COVID-19 pandemic. Many companies have to move to online services, and you can do this much quicker with the cloud and cloud migration. One should also bear in mind that when you migrate to the cloud, you have to re-engineer your applications if you have any in-house applications. So it might be a bit of a longer-term task to actually rewrite applications to take advantage of all of the benefits that the cloud service providers have to offer. So to kind of conclude, if you're an SME and you have limited resources, the cloud makes complete sense. You have to move to the cloud because you don't have money for DBA, you don't have money for backups, you've addressed your disaster recovery risks, you've addressed, even especially in South Africa, things like Eskom and power outages, etc. So it's very compelling from a small business point of view. From a big business point of view, clearly there's advantages as well. There's a skill shortage in South Africa. One way to address that is to move your resources to the cloud. However, with a big business, you've got the balance sheets and the income statements able to keep some of your strategic assets inside, or at least keep some skill in-house, so that if anything does go wrong, you can actually bring it back in-house and manage it. Personally, I prefer to run things on-premise. That's because I'm a technology guy, and I prefer to have control over the technology that I'm running. One of the arguments which you will hear them also advance in the cloud is that they have all the skills and they're the best skills going, so you don't have to worry about downtime, etc. You've got much better SLAs than your own internal IT department. And I don't think that's completely true. There's some truth to that, of course, if you don't have IT resources, but if you've got good IT resources, you can have better uptimes than some of the service providers or the cloud service providers that are out there. Whenever Google or AWS have a service outage, it's always, it's Google AWS. Whereas if your IT department has one, then it's like the end of the world. So I think it's can be a bit of a double standard there. But I do understand the argument that they put forward about the SLAs and availability. Another risk that you must consider is price changes and fluctuations. once all of your data is there, can they suddenly have a price increase and then you are exposed, right? You're at risk because the price has gone up and you can't move out easily. One of the other things to consider, especially in COVID-19, and if you're a small business, what happens if you move to the cloud and your cash flow disappears for 2 months? Now, if you're on the cloud and everything's on the cloud and you can't pay for 2 months, everything gets cut off, you're dead in the water. You actually can't recover your business, right? Because all of your operational applications, etc., are now no longer functional. You cannot reach them. You cannot even pay to start making money. So basically, the tools you need to make money are denied to you. You don't have access to it. Whereas if it's on-prem, you can probably carry on for a little bit longer, being able to put off paying creditors or address the cash flow situation while you build up a business again. So I think this is also something to consider for small businesses. Also, maybe large businesses might become an issue as well. This was the problem, for example, when we only had the telecom as a service provider in South Africa. If you had a dispute about your bill with telecom, there's nothing you can do. You just had to pay it. Because if you didn't pay it, even if you were in the right, they'll just cut you off. And so the similar situation might arise with the service providers, the cloud service providers, where if you're in a dispute, will they actually talk to you? Now, maybe if you're big enough and you've got an account manager, they might actually kind of have some kind of dispute resolution process. If you're a small company, they're not even going to bother. They won't. The whole way they get scalability is by not having people there to help people with questions on the telephone, etc. So that's another risk to consider, especially if you're a small business. Another thing to consider is that you're using a shared resource. So this has certain cybersecurity implications. And maybe your vital critical system is running right next to somebody's running a game server, right? Or even worse, somebody involved in illegal activity. Maybe they're crypto mining. And because you're sharing with other people, there's a certain set of attack vectors which are more significant in the cloud environment, right? So especially all the ones we see around the hardware, the CPUs for Intel and AMD, like Spectre and Meltdown, where they can actually potentially read from one virtual machine to the next. They can read the memory in your virtual machine. This is something obviously is less of an issue when you're running it on-prem because you don't have a shared resource. Those vulnerabilities are still there, but it's less likely somebody first to get onto your machine before they can exploit it. And if they're on your machine already, well, you're probably in a bad situation to begin with. Whereas in the cloud, they just sign up on the machine that you potentially can be on. So that's just another factor to consider when you're looking at moving to the cloud. So I guess that's my position on cloud at the moment. Personally, at Jumping Bean, we try and keep as much in-house as possible, although I do recognize the advantage of the cloud. And you can also be strategic about how you use the cloud. What are you going to put on the cloud? Maybe don't put everything. Maybe just put the dev and staging, for example, on the cloud, rather than putting your entire production infrastructure in the cloud. That's also, by the way, one of the advantages that I'll mention about using the cloud. Is that in the past, you always had to have a dev environment and a staging environment that didn't have as much resources as the production environment had. So if you had sort of resource issues or resource constraints in production, you couldn't test them properly in dev. Or you couldn't test the resource usage completely in dev because it didn't have as much processing power as you have in production. And therefore that can definitely be addressed by using cloud service providers. Well, that's my take on cloud service providers. If you have any opinions or points that you'd like to make, please leave them in the comments below. Thanks.